Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. I apologize for us starting a little late. Time kind of got away from me, at least. And so, anyway, welcome to today, September 1st. Happy new month of September to everybody. This is the Tuesday, September 1st staff meeting or workshop, whichever you prefer. So with that, I'll turn this over to Tom Stoltz.
Thanks, Chairman.
Good
morning, Commission. Today we have 3 items to talk about during staff, and then, of course, whatever you all want to talk about. We're going to start off by having Andrew Diltz get up and give us an update on the energy audit that we had talked about several months ago, pre-COVID. We've been looking for a time to maybe bring that back and refresh that, so he's here to give us an update today. The second item we'll talk about is just a COVID update, generally speaking. Make a quick look at the dashboard and talk about some things that'll be changing there, but potentially, and Tim will give us an update on testing. And then just a brief item regarding election ballot boxes and some changes, or a move that we made to help the election commissioner's office. So those are the 3 items. And Andrew, if you'd start us off, please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Andrew Diltz, Facilities Director, here to present the Sedgwick County Facilities Energy Audit RFI responses. In 2019, the Facilities Department began evaluating renewable energy sources and suitable facilities. We looked into solar panels and presented an evaluation of installing solar at the Extension Office at the end of 2019. As a result, $225,486 in CIP funds were set aside for executing energy audit recommendations. At the beginning of 2020, we produced an RFI on conducting energy audits. And we also evaluated wind energy, which led us to the DRPS tariff proposal with Evergy, which was presented last month. And when we look into the energy audits, there are essentially 3 categories that we're going to be diving into pretty heavily. That's going to be the HVAC equipment, including the building automation systems, which is the HVAC control software and the hardware. We're also going to be looking into our water consumption and the building envelope. Building envelope would be windows, doors, insulation, things of that nature. Essentially breaking this into 2 phases. Phase 1, we would hire an energy audit contractor. They would come in and perform a comprehensive analysis of the utility bills and existing building systems. They would also they would then make recommendations on energy conservation measures with detailed cost estimates, projected cost savings, and life cycle costs. Phase 2, the facilities department would take the minor recommendations and complete those with in-house staff and funds from the facility's operation budget. And then the more expensive, complex recommendations will be submitted as a capital improvement project, and that's where the $225,000 in CIP funds would come into play. Financial analysis, phase 1, we would hire a contractor to conduct the energy audit utilizing facilities operational budget, and we would do that in 2020. I'm anticipating that cost to be right around $50,000. And in phase 2, we would implement the recommendations. Currently the $225,486 is budgeted in the CIP for executing the energy audit recommendations. And any recommendations beyond the current CIP funds would be submitted for additional CIP funding. And I will stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Is there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do I understand correctly the $50,000 for the phase 1 audit, is that coming out of the 225?
No, that would be coming out of the facility's operational budget. So the 225 is in CIP funds, and that 225 would only be used to perform the recommendations as a result of the energy audit. So the energy audit, the contractor is going to come in. We're going to pay them $50,000 or whatever that price turns out to be out of our operating budget. They produce a number of recommendations saying you make this improvement here, you switch out this equipment, upgrade it to something new, more efficient. It's going to save you this much money over this much time. performing that repair would come out of the CIP funds.
Okay. One thing you've not mentioned yet, but I don't know the status. What's our situation on LED lighting through our facilities?
The lighting in all of our facilities, as the existing lights burn out, they are being upgraded to LEDs. So we're not removing working lighting. As they burn out, we replace them with LEDs or upgrade them to LEDs.
Do we know what percentage of our buildings have been converted at this point?
I could not speak to that right now, but I can certainly come up with something and come back with you.
I'm sure there's got to be a return on the investment. So at some point, it would be great to say that we've made that conversion, it's been complete. And the sooner that happens, obviously, the more the money we would save on terms of energy costs. But we don't want to necessarily, cost more money earlier by doing this when we have equipment that hasn't reached end of life already. I understand the conflict between those two things. I get it, but I guess in terms of an energy audit, it seems like there ought to be some thought to find out whether it would be worthwhile to go ahead and on purpose change that out, just because it would be maybe more efficient just to go through the buildings one time, and the return on the investment, I'm sure, is calculated.
I know there are a number of parking lots, if not all the parking lots, have been upgraded to LEDs. Do you want to speak?
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Tanya Cole, Assistant County Manager. To your LED question, I might just mention with the Ronald Reagan Building, with that project, that was one of the first projects where we took that entire building and converted that building to all LED. And from that point forward, all of our buildings should now be LED lighting as we move into new projects. So as Andrew said, as we change, as we replace lighting, there are now LED lightings. But as we have new projects, all of those lighting should now be LED lights moving forward.
I guess my question is, I've seen them in this building, for example. They come out and change out a fluorescent ballast, they'll switch it over to LED. But they're in the offices all the time, doing one here, one there, and it just makes me wonder if that's the right strategy on how to convert this building, for example, or that we should just do it more on purpose. If there ought to be a return on the investment calculation for that as well. Of course, the other thing you've not mentioned yet, and I'm just curious, and that is motion detectors for places like hallways and corridors. And maybe I know our restrooms here have that, for example, but other places that might benefit from a motion detector type technology.
And we can install those in-house. It just kind of varies on the location, on whether or not we want to put that in. So a hallway, for example, may require multiple motion sensors depending on who's walking into a hallway, where the doorways are and that kind of thing. And those motion sensors can be fairly expensive to install, but that is something that we are trying to do proactively. But the hallways, we haven't gotten into so much. We're mainly focusing on the smaller rooms, the restrooms that are used infrequently, and break rooms, things of that nature.
In terms of an audit, though, I guess I was just curious. If we're talking about replacing windows and doors, that's also very expensive, and everything should be looked at. So I would assume that we would want to look at that as well.
And we can certainly add an electrical component to this, a lighting component to this energy audit. It will probably increase our cost a little bit, but that's something we can certainly add.
I'd just like to think about it a little bit. So it may be of interest. I'm not sure yet. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
You bet. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, good morning, Andrew. Couple questions. The RFI, that's going out when?
That went out early in 2020. So we already have the results of that RFI, which is how I was able to come up with the approximate number on what it's going to cost our budget to fund the energy audit.
Good. And how many buildings did that entail?
I believe it was around 13.
And is that all of the buildings then?
That is not all of the buildings. That was more the core downtown facilities and some of the, I believe, Public Works, admin building. Our highest users, electricity users, were accounted for on that, in that number.
Okay. So now we've got the results back on that RFI, and do we then go out with RFPs, or what do we go out with next to be able to accomplish this next step?
I'd have to talk to Joe Thomas, but we could do an RFP, an RFB. We may even be able to, there's another agreement that we're we're a member of, that we can hire vendors that have already gone out to and established contract pricing, and we can hire somebody that route. But we'll probably do an RFB or an RFP to determine who we're going to hire.
Okay. And how many buildings then haven't we looked at or we're not considering?
Countywide,
Yes.
I would imagine all fire and EMS facilities have not been looked at.
That's
You're looking
correct.
at the main core. Tanya, you want to talk to that?
including parks.
The manager's right. I mean, we didn't include fire and EMS. We include mostly, as Andrew mentioned, our high user energy type of facilities, 24/7 type of facilities. So the 13, so we included the jail, correction type facilities, and then our main core courthouse facilities in that energy audit. So, you know, we account for maybe about 42 of our main facilities. So it would include those type of EMS, fire stations within that energy audit.
Very good. Well, when you get the results back and we start implementing some of these things, to HVAC and so forth, water consumption and looking at the building envelope, we may want to then do a cost-benefit analysis and see if it's worthwhile to take a look at some of our other buildings as we move forward.
I think you're right, Commissioner. I think some of the things that they will come back with might be some things that we can easily implement in some of those other buildings.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for the briefing. I appreciate it. I think we're moving in the right direction. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dennis. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so this, we already have the 225,000 that we already approved. So this is additional 50,000 on top of that?
Correct, but the 225,000 would be in CIP funds.
Okay,
And so the 50,000 is going to come out of the facilities operation budget.
okay, okay. Thank you, that answers my question. Thank you for all your work on this, I appreciate it. This is exciting.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thanks again, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right. Tom, next up, please.
Are you satisfied, Tanya? I think I'm hearing that you want us to move ahead with this audit. That seems to be the consensus. Okay,
Seems to
very
be,
good.
yeah.
The next thing we'll talk about, and KFK will bring up the dashboard, we'll just quickly talk about some COVID issues. The staff has been having a pretty robust discussion regarding the data we show on the website. We got IT involved in this now and some of the business process people over there, as well as health department staff. We're not quite ready to roll that yet. We were hoping to have a discussion about that today, but I sent you an email just about a half hour or so ago that we'd like to defer that till next week. So all of the numbers on the current board are trending the right direction for us. You can see our 14-day rolling our rolling data seems to be going down. Tim will talk about testing. We're actually doing just a bit less testing in the recent past, and I think there's some reasons for that he maybe will get into. And then the next slide, the hospital slide, Kate. We talked yesterday with the hospitals, and again, we're trending in the right direction there as well. Less patients in the hospital, less ICU patients, more ICU beds available. So those are trending all the direction we want them to trend. Anecdotally, and Commissioner Dennis and Commissioner Cruz were on the call yesterday. The hospitals, it's not so much bed space for them now. There's enough of that. They both indicated they have some staffing issues because of quarantine or COVID illness with their staff. They're all concerned universally about what will happen when schools will open. Everybody's hoping that will just stay flatlined or continue to go down, but they're anticipating and looking toward that. Anything else, Commissioner Dennis or Commissioner Cruz, that I forgot that we'd want to mention here in an open meeting that was discussed? VA had some cases. The VA has been and the VA numbers are not included in this dashboard number. That's just the public hospitals that citizens can go to, the regional hospitals, Wesley and Via Christi. But the VA had a few cases yesterday. They'd been running 0, 1, 2, and I think they're up to 6, I think now, and a couple of them in ICU. So that was a little bit different.
Okay.
The biggest thing,
Yeah.
Chairman, if I may,
Yeah.
is the question was asked to our physicians about masking. I know that, our order is going to be expiring pretty soon, and the topic came up. We also talked about, I know the chairman and I had talked, I'm sure we've all received as commissioners emails from different school boards around, different teachers. The woman who was here made a pretty compelling argument about facial expressions. And so we were wondering, if the consensus is that we have to keep going down this track to keep our numbers where they're at, as far as masking goes, when we think of education and teachers, is there a way to talk about shields that are clear instead of masks for teachers? Those were questions that I'd like to discuss in this open meeting, just so that we can all have a clear understanding of expectations going forward. So if we could have that conversation. So right before we get to that, though, the doctors do recommend staying the course with masking. They have a pretty strict mask policy within the hospital still. And so it was their recommendation to keep masking in place. So I wanted to mention that.
Okay, and Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. The big question is we've got a decision to make here in the very near future on what we do with the order. And the consensus on the phone call yesterday was that we're going in the right direction, as you can see from the charts that we have on our dashboard, and they do not recommend that we move away from the mask order currently. And I agree with Commissioner Cruz that we have received some emails. They are honestly only from one district, one rural district in Sedgwick County. Those emails are not coming from more than one. As a result of that, though, I sent out an email yesterday to every superintendent in Sedgwick County that's headquartered here in all 10 major public school districts and the Catholic Diocese School District. And we're getting a lot of feedback from that, and I can share with the commission as soon as I get information from everybody, but currently they do want to keep the mask order in place, is the bottom line, is the consensus. Let me talk about shields for a minute. If we go back in time a little to before we started getting into these mask orders, I talked to the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Randy Watson, up in Topeka, and he was talking about face shields and thought that this would be a great opportunity to be able to have the teachers, their lips, so that the students can see exactly what they're saying. And so as a result of that, I did a little bit of research on the face shields. I brought it up to the manager, and as a result of that, I believe that some of the input that I had, that was included in our orders up to this point. If you look at where it gives the definition of masks, at the bottom of that, it says that face shields serve in place of a mask. And I strongly believe that that's the direction we need to go, especially for our younger students and our teachers. So in the future, if we are going to revisit this, and I think we are going to revisit it in the near future, I think it's critical that we keep that face shield as an option for our schools especially. So those are the things that I've seen here recently, and I'll give you all more information on what I get back from the superintendents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and thank you, Commissioner Dennis, for reaching out to the 11 superintendents. That's good feedback, because that seems to be a hot topic. The community at whole has a lot of emotion about masking in general, but as we've received some information, and I think lost in the conversation is what you just pointed out. I have been reviewing the recent mask order, and it's very clear under the definition, Section 4, that the last sentence says that this definition includes a face shield. of some kind. There's a number of references in there to say mask or other face covering, mask or other face covering. That's said probably 8 or 9 times in the order, and can be made of all kinds of stuff, quality of fabrics and other options from either household items and stuff like that. So, but it does say includes face shields. So I think that might be something that I don't know that our superintendents or our school districts understand, especially for the young grades, that a face shield is okay. So if that helps clarify some of the conversation that we're having. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you. Yeah, commissioners, that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think there's a lot of confusion, and I wonder how, communications, I'm looking at y'all in the back, how can we shift our billboard messaging? How can we include that in the messaging that's around town so that it is clear and there is no confusion for school opening next week in regards to what an actual face covering is and what our definition is? Clearly, Chairman has reiterated the fact of what's written in the order. Some of these orders are confusing and they're very lengthy. Mike, did you?
Well, when
Did
you're
you wanna
finished,
say
Commissioner-
something?
Why, yeah, well, somewhere my sign's been lost, I guess. We can get those in a minute. I was just going to point out, just to add further confusion to this issue, the
Thanks.
city of Wichita's mask order is still in place, and it doesn't have any, to my knowledge, exception for face shields. And the governor's order, which this commission has the authority to walk back, but has never done so, also, and I think it's valid until the middle of September, it doesn't have an exception for face shields too. So it might be somewhat misleading. I mean, you can make an argument that even in the non-incorporated area of the county or outside of the city of Wichita, they would have to still follow the governor's order unless we walk that back in some fashion. So it's, when you have these 3 orders all trying to mesh in school districts, having to deal with all 3 orders, it gets to be pretty confusing, so.
Thanks for that clarification
Okay.
of the confusion that is here.
Yeah, no, it makes it difficult because we can certainly include the face shield as part of the masking exception and requirement, but unless City of Wichita and the governor go along with us, it's going to be difficult for school districts to know that there's some kind of unified procedure or policy that they can follow, so.
So, Mr. Manager, is that something that we could have a conversation with Dr. Minns? I mean, if we're going to walk anything back, if there is the will of the board to do so, and my comments here today are not for or against. It's just facilitating a conversation as far as what is best for our community and the things that we're hearing around our county. In addition to the masking and the face shields, I wonder how, now that we have opened up bars, I wonder if we could maybe facilitate another conversation with them to see how it's going. I think it's important for us to keep that open, so I don't know if communications could work to facilitate another conversation. I did just receive a message from one of the bar owners talking about how it's very hard. And so if we could maybe get that together before next week so that we can, if we're going to make a change, if that's the will of the board and the will of our health officer, we can have that conversation.
Okay. Well, several things. As in anything with COVID, it's evolutionary. There are different products out online now that are face masks, which are clear, because everybody understands the teacher's needs and the kids' needs to see the bottom half of your face when you're trying to instruct the subject. So there are some additional products on the market today which would facilitate that. We will talk to Dr. Minns about, get clarity on the shield. I think it also makes sense to talk with the city of Wichita and get some type of governmental consistency, at least here in Sedgwick County, between the biggest city and between the county on what the rules are, so it's clear, more clear for people. We can set up the bar public meeting, Commissioner, and get some input from them. I'm not sure if Dr. Menz is considering a change there or not, but it wouldn't hurt to talk with people and see how it's going. Okay, I mean, I'm good, and things are changing out there, so we have to pay attention to different kinds of products and things that are now available for the public that maybe weren't available a month ago, so.
Okay, and Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the governor's order, what date does it expire?
I think it's September 15th.
September 15th?
Now,
Okay.
keep in mind, the Attorney General is opined that this board can walk that, whatever phrase you want to walk back, amend, or nullify that order if it so chooses. But the board up to now has never done that. So that order is still in effect for all our school districts in the state.
Okay. Well, it'd sure be nice if we could get all of the orders so that they're kind of similar, especially Wichita and Sedgwick County. Change subject just really briefly. One thing I appreciate that the health department's done is that they've set up free testing for all of the teachers. I think that's great, but the problem is they're scheduled from 8 to noon, and I don't think that that's great. That's when they're in class. So we need to figure out some way that we can adjust that in order to be able to accommodate those teachers. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I might mention, Commissioner, when Tim talks about testing, he's going to talk about expanded hours and some options for that.
And Commissioner Howell.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I want to be on record that I don't think we need a third order. I think by allowing that state order to continue, it does add confusion. And I don't think it provides anything that's not already contained in either the Sedgwick County or Wichita orders. And so I think it would be wise for the county commission to do whatever steps are necessary to essentially take one of the three orders off the table. And so if there's a motion that needs to be made at one of our next meetings, I would like to have that considered for the Board of Health. Second of all, I understand there's a desire by some commissioners to have uniformity amongst all our school districts, but I do think if there's a district out there that says we want to do something different, again, it's a very small school district. They don't seem to have the big city issues that we're having here in Sedgwick County, in the city of Wichita at least. And we talk about one-size-fits-all policy. We don't like it when the state tells every county to do things that some counties don't have the same problems. And so keeping those policies local and relevant to what's going on in each community, in my opinion, is the right answer. And even though it's just one school district, I don't know why we would not allow that school district to make policy for their situation based on their data. And so these are elected officials. They understand the difficulties and what needs to be done to mitigate risk there. But if they don't have cases to speak of in their school, give them the authority to make policy there. I don't see a problem with that. And if 259 and other districts want to continue on with a county policy, they would have the authority to embrace and adopt a county policy that would say, we would like to see schools, comply with these ideas, but give them the authority to opt out. I think that would be a reasonable policy. Even though it's just one school district, I'd like to see them have the option to opt out. So, I would like to see us go in that direction. And then I also would say, since our order is going to end again on September the 8th is our last day, I guess, for this current order, if we're going to make changes, I would like to see us provide some advance notice to those impacted. I don't like the idea of doing this last minute changes. I think that it's hard on the community to react, if you will, in a very short number of days. And so if there's going to be changes, I think we ought to be doing whatever we can to lean forward and get those ideas codified so we know what's going to happen sooner than later. So if Dr. Menz is going to issue another order, let's get that ball rolling and find out what that's going to be. And if we want to have discussion here, and it might be in total agreement with Dr. Menz, we ought to have that discussion sooner than later as well. And then finally, no matter what the data does, if the data goes up or down, I don't know if the argument changes. Talked about, Dr. Menz mentioned the last time he came to this commission, I asked a question, if do we think that this mask order is going to go away if the numbers improve or they don't improve? And I think he agreed that they're not going to go away. So this idea that we're going to issue, a 2-week or 3-week or 4-week order, in my opinion, is not being completely clear to the community that, I understand one of our large counties of our state already issued an order basically to the end of the year. I think that's what Dr. Min said. And so whatever we're going to do, we ought to have a vision for what's going to happen the rest of this year. But the thresholds, the numbers are going down, the numbers are improving. Is there a number that says if the number hits this certain threshold, we're going to want to, have this order expire? I don't know that there's a number on the, I'm not sure there's anybody would propose a number. And if the numbers are going the other direction, if they're increasing, no one's going to propose a number that says, well, the masks are not working, so therefore let's go ahead and allow the order to expire. That's not going to happen either. So no matter what the data does, whether it goes up or goes down, improves or gets worse, I don't think there's going to be an argument from anybody with authority to see these orders go away. So I guess I just have some concerns about the thresholds. And so we talk like there's a number that if we hit a certain threshold, we're going to do something differently. I don't think that's being totally forthright with the community and the public. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I don't see any other comments.
Okay.
So, Tom?
Tim, you want to talk about testing?
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Tim Kaufman, Deputy County Manager. Lots of things, as Tom mentioned, this is all fluid. Lots of things moving in the area of testing. Last week, our health department sampled 700 individuals. That number is down a little bit, and so we did make the announcement that as of yesterday, we would start sampling asymptomatic school, in-classroom, school-based employees. So if there are teachers that are doing in-classroom instructing, they're eligible for that same testing, just like the other specialty populations, first responders, folks who work in nursing facilities, that sort of thing. We do recognize that from a timing standpoint, our current hours aren't really conducive for teachers. We've got a couple of weeks before, or a week before school starts, so hopefully 259 folks can get in and get sampled this week. And we are also, as we're adding staff, we will be ready to expand hours at our drive-through sampling site to include 2 to 3 evenings a week. We'll go to a 6-hour sampling schedule, and we will try and add 1 to 2 Saturday mornings a week as well, so that we can be more available for when folks are available to be sampled. And I think that over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we should have all of those additional time slots implemented so that we can do some additional sampling there. We have tested about 80,000 folks in our community so far. We'll continue to test as things occur. We've noticed the last couple of weeks kind of a decline in the number of folks that are being sampled right now, and I think there may be a few different reasons. One is that we've seen on our dashboard that the number of folks that are testing positive goes down, so that reduces the number of people that they may expose, and so we've got, I think, fewer people that meet the criteria for sampling, whether they're symptomatic or have been exposed, and so that number's gone down a little bit. And I also think that there are some people that just don't like the idea of that swab, and so they're waiting. We've talked a little bit about the saliva sample, and I think there's some folks that are waiting for the availability of that saliva sample, and so we've got some news on that as well. The last thing that we have to work out with the lab that we're going to use initially is some record-keeping details. I think we'll get those sorted out this week so that we'll be able to sample folks beginning next week. We're going to do it in a phased, tiered way. We've identified different types of providers that are going to help us with the sampling. We'll use it to some degree. We'll also use it with what we call our Tier 1 sampling sites, and so those are locations that have staff that have some expertise in sampling and working with lab samples. For example, a nursing home or a long-term care facility has some staff in it. We would roll out the saliva-based sampling to them initially and have them start that. And then we'll be doing it in our testing site. And then as we are sure that we can handle the back end, because as we increase testing, each one of those samples, there's a potential for a much greater amount of work to come with it if it's a positive result. And so we want to make sure that we're able to continue to track and trace folks that are positive and their contacts as well. So we will gradually roll out this saliva sampling through a number of different types of samples. So eventually we'll be working with other clinics that do sampling as well, and they'll have the CARES funded saliva sampling available to them, so that we'll have a much broader array of different places where individuals will be able to go to get that saliva sampling. So we want to do it in a thoughtful, careful way so that we don't overwhelm the system. We've got our mobile outreach clinic. They'll probably begin using that saliva sampling system as well. We've got 8 different sites scheduled throughout the month of September, 6 in Wichita and 2 outside of Wichita. We'll continue to do that throughout the fall as well. I guess the other thing that I would mention about sampling is that we, as I talked, we want to expand the hours that we're available. And so we're hiring staff right now. We're working with the staffing firm. We're bringing people in every week. And as I said, I think by the end of next week, we'll be able to expand those hours so that we can catch more folks. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. So since we're kind of swan, can you just walk us through that real quick?
Especially right now, that's still the process. We want folks to call 211. Right now, if people call 211 before 4:30 or 5 at the end of the day, we're getting them scheduled for the following day. And we will continue to offer some of that nasal swab testing for folks who there's a belief out there that, and again, we've talked a little bit about how things change and how quickly they change. The saliva sampling that we'll be doing, we're going to run through a PCR test. The PCR test is, again, that gold standard in terms of identifying whether or not there's an active virus. And the saliva test that we'll do is the same way. And so it will eventually we'll collect that sample overnight, we'll get it to the lab, they'll process it. And then either by the end of that second day or the third day, those results will be available to folks that take the sample. But we'll use a similar process, starting with 211, to get folks scheduled for whatever type of sample we're going to collect.
So before you would call 211, I filled out a form when I got my test. Are they going to have to fill out a form? Tom talks about the front end.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about that?
That's part of that detail that we're still working out with this new lab that we'll be using. We think that we'll be able to we're going to help them. They have a registration process. They're going to help us on the back end with some of that notification. So we need to figure out how do we help the person being sampled get that registration information completed. So that's the final detail that we're working out. And we don't know yet if we'll do that over the phone or if we'll do that at the time that they come for their sample. Once we get that detail worked out, we'll publish that information as well.
Okay, so we've talked about those who have a smartphone getting the results from the saliva-based testing, but what if someone doesn't have a smartphone? How are they able to get their results?
Those results should get entered back into our portal that we're using right now to make results available, and so folks can, after 2 or 3 days right now, log in and check and see if that's available, and if they can't log in, if they don't have capacity to do that, they can call and we can find those results for them.
So if they tell us up front that they don't have the ability to log in or get it on their cell, we're not going to automatically call them. They're going to have to call us. Is that what you're saying?
They can call us. It depends on how urgent they feel about getting their results. We went to the portal so that folks could get results as quickly as possible. So we're going to track to see who hasn't picked up their results. And if they haven't picked up those results in a couple of days, then we're going to outreach to them.
Yeah, I
can
love
call in.
the technology that we're able to utilize. But for those people that don't have that access, I want to make sure that we don't let anybody fall through the cracks.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah. They can still call in, and we've got staff that'll help find those results and release those results to them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cruz. Got Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I appreciate that you're looking at the teachers. Just remember, just because there's no students in the classrooms today, doesn't mean that the teachers aren't there at work. So we can't say that we can test them this week because they're doing all kinds of staff development. They're doing all kinds of things they're scheduled for. So I think we need to make sure that we pay attention to how that we can get them tested. Whether we go in and say, hey, we can bring our mobile unit out there to a school and test all of your teachers at the school, or if there's some other possibility. I'm excited that we're finally to the point where we can maybe do some saliva testing. That's taken a lot longer than I had hoped that we'd get to this point. I sure hope we can start it next week. But if we can do that, and you need a trained professional, why the school districts have nurses and so forth in their schools in a lot of cases. I don't know if we can work with the nurses, with the health officials in each school district and see if we can give saliva sample kits to the schools and let them do the testing and get the information back to us. Just think outside the box and find out how that we can do this without disrupting what they're trying to do. The school districts are going through a tremendous amount of upheaval right now, trying to figure out how to open their schools safely, and we need to be good partners and help making it easy as we can on them rather than making it more difficult. So, one question that I'll have, hopefully we can answer here sometime in the near future. I read an article yesterday about the nasal test, and it went on to explain, and I don't know if it's 100% accurate or not, so just take it with a grain of salt, okay? But it said that the way that they take that and do the test is that they have to amplify that sample a number of times, like 40 or 50 times, in order to be able to find out if there's any kind of genetic material from the virus there. And this article said because you've amplified it so many times, that we're having individuals that are not experiencing any symptoms and probably couldn't pass it on to anyone else that are coming up as positive because of the amplification process. So I hope that as we transition from the nasal test to the saliva test, maybe that won't happen. I don't know if they have to amplify that also, but the article was saying that we're having so many more positives is because of this amplification. So if you can get some experts someplace to figure out if that's true or not, I'd be interested.
My surface level understanding is that they also amplify the saliva sample, but I'll talk to some of the scientists that we work with and have them make sure that they help us understand if there's a risk of false positives because of that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. So, Tim, you mentioned we had 700 tests, which, according to our estimates, is about a third of what our goal is of about 2,200. When's the last time we've been in contact with WSU to see where they are with their plans as far as testing in our lab?
We had a meeting with them yesterday,
Okay.
and their target date right now is October, maybe late September, to be able
Wow,
to have
okay.
their lab ready to go. So in addition to
So
working
that's
through all
moved
the
up
details.
considerably.
Yes. And as we're working through the details with the lab that we're going to use initially, we're also starting those planning processing meetings with WSU so that we can have a smooth transition as well.
Okay. So, as far as their timing, they're going to keep you posted as well. And are you planning like weekly meetings with them, or?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
We've got multiple teams because there's multiple factors that we need to sort through, legal, finance, and operations, and so they're all going to be meeting.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Tim, I have a question that's, are you or any of our staff or even commissioners, I know Dr. Alicia Thompson has put a COVID task force together of 20 people to advise her Are we on that? Are we
Adrian
represented?
is.
Adrian, you're on it? Okay. All right, thank you. I just was hopeful that, since we're a big part of the testing and the solution, that we were represented on that task force with somewhere. Okay,
I think they made the right choice.
okay, thank you. Commissioner Howe?
Thank you. I just want to say, I agree with the comments from Commissioner Dennis about having the schools do the saliva testing. I think that's certainly a thing I think we ought to be pushing towards. But in terms of the numbers, wasn't it recommended that we would do 2,200 per day? Isn't that what was recommended to us at our briefing? And so the health department's doing about, if you take the 700 last week divided by 5 days, I assume, of testing, that's about 140 a day. And at that time, they talked about they were about to double their capacity. So the difference between doubling capacity and actually we've reduced our actual testing numbers, is it because we just don't have, I think as you said, we don't have people who can meet the criteria, and we believe that's one of the
Correct.
issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We have unfilled slots every day now. And so and that's one of the reasons why we felt like we were ready to expand the number of asymptomatic folks that we test with the teachers. But we also know that our goal is, again, to get to that 2,200 a day. And so we're certainly not going to be able to manage that many ourselves. And so that's why we've got this plan to roll out to other providers, including schools and things like that as well.
I certainly agree with giving the priority to our teachers, and again, I think maybe the saliva testing would be a lot more easy to implement in terms of doing this in the schools and having the health staff there take care of that on behalf of the county. It's a great solution. But with respect to our drive-through testing unit, if we have capacity there that we're not using, I would like to see us reduce our requirements to be tested, whatever it would take to get to that target number. And if we have people in the community, even if we have to go to community asymptomatic testing, I think that's the right direction we need to be moving towards. And so, whatever it would get us back to that goal. And what was our daily goal? We stated it a couple weeks ago. What was that goal for our drive-through?
Well, we'd like to get to 500 to 550 folks a day.
Per day.
Yeah, and that's through expanded hours, and again, more folks in the community identifying and going through the process to get scheduled.
So based on those numbers, we're probably 400. We're probably 400 short per day right now. Based on, we did 700 last week. That's 140 a day. So there's a lot of capacity there. So we've got things in place to do that. So I think we should open this up as soon as possible. Again, giving priority to teachers, obviously, but whatever capacity is left, we need to open that up. And I don't know what it would take to make that happen, but, and in terms of, I know you said there was a problem with our ability to do the contact tracing and try to deal with, and when you get a positive, there's a lot of work that represents. But the number one thing you have to do is to let the person know that they've tested positive so they can isolate and not continue to spread that virus. And so in terms of having a long conversation saying who all the, where all the places you've been and who all the places you've talked with, I understand it takes a long time, and I understand that is, it represents a lot of work, but the first thing you have to do is let that person know that they tested positive, that they need to isolate. And if you have more people that test positive, getting that first piece of information out to those people specifically has to be the number one priority, even above and beyond contact tracing.
I would agree with you 100%, and that's one of the reasons that we opened up that portal so that folks could retrieve those results themselves. And so even if you do test positive, that there's a note there that says that you tested positive and some general guidelines, but then we're also going to follow that up with a contact from a disease investigator. So absolutely, we want to get that information in the hands of the individuals as quickly as possible, help them understand what their new responsibilities become so that they don't spread any further. And then we follow up with in-person contacts as well.
Well, I guess I hope my comments are acceptable, but I just think we need to do what we can to get to that target of 550 per day. I think that's our goal. We should be there now, and whatever it takes to get to that number ought to be part of our strategy. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we know how many tests with the health department plus our community providers are doing a day? Because that 2,000 number was the entire community, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
is there a way for
We're-
us to know that?
Well, we can back into that number probably on a weekly basis because we show that number on the dashboard. But we do about a quarter of the tests, so take what we're doing and multiply that by 4, and that gets us the community total. So, right, we're not going to do all 2,200 tests each week.
Right.
Or each day.
I guess I just want to make the distinction that we are not doing all of those. We're in a collaboration with our community clinics and providers in our community. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks again, Tim. I don't see any other questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tom?
Just one thing on testing real quick, and Commissioner Cruz brought it up before, the 211 system. Anytime we talk about increasing numbers, I feel like the 211 system, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but they are about at the hilt. So if we increase numbers, we're going to have to come up with another strategy, another way to get the sampling started, another way for people to schedule. So that's all part of this dynamic as we talk back and forth across the aisle. And then before we leave the COVID subject, as I've mentioned, we'll bring some additional information back next week about cleaning up the dashboard. There's really several sites to the dashboard now. There's the dashboard itself. There's the recovery metrics, which Kate has brought up, which Dr. Menz uses, and Health Department favors this particular metric. There's school guidance out online now for schools, and the state has put out a comprehensive type of school measuring stick to help schools decide how to operate as the virus fluctuates. And then we're really making an effort to clean up our care site as well to make it more user-friendly. WIT, God love them, they come in and they give us suggestions on how to scientifically put that information out, but we need to simplify that to some degree. So Lindsay and her staff are working with communications on that as well. So just there's a lot of dynamics with the information, with communications that we put out regarding our dashboard and our information for people to make it as simple as we possibly can. With that, Commissioner Dennis asked me yesterday about ballot boxes, and so I just want to give a summary on where we're at with the implementation of ballot boxes before the general election in Sedgwick County. Earlier in the summer, the county Commissioner Lehman's office got $420,000 of Help America Vote Act funds. She designated very early on in that some of that money was going to be earmarked for ballot drop boxes to be used. As the unfolding Postal Service issues have come up, there's been more of a commitment made, and Anna Meyerhoff, which is we put over in elections to give administrative support to that office while Tabitha's recovering from her process. They have purchased 14 such boxes now. Julie Lorenz is the Recovery Office Executive Director now. She has mentioned that there may be more coming out to counties, but to date, right now in Sedgwick County, we have purchased 14 such boxes out of our $420,000 original dollars that were dedicated to Sedgwick County. So just an update there, and then I'll be glad to answer questions as best I can. I'd like to bring Anna and some election staff in within the next week or two just to give you an update on some challenges that they're having and what it's going to be looking like for the general election, which we all know is going to be a very busy session. So,
Okay. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Tom, for that update. So are we going to have those, a map of where those are located, and they'll be, you know, I'll speak for my district, Park City, Valley Center, Mays, there'll be one specifically in those areas?
Yeah, we'll have Anna come in and give you a summary, but clearly it'll be a geographic spread
Okay.
of the ballot boxes. I know also Anna has into motion already, using the arena for advanced voting, putting, I think she said 50 voting machines down there. And they're going to use the south corridor of the arena. There's plenty of parking, plenty of space, and up to 2 weeks before the election, I think we'll be using the arena as a super site to get as much advanced voting out of the way as possible to minimize the crowds on election day.
Is there a way to consider other venues around, like Cotillion or Hartman Arena or some?
Both of those we did
locations?
look at. Both of those have some events scheduled to where they were not accessible
Available,
for us.
okay.
So, yeah, we're looking at all options there.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Al?
Like, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two comments. The one that's in front of the courthouse out here, I've noticed that it's on the passenger side of a vehicle on a one-way street. So I'm not sure what we can do with that, but it seems like it ought to be on the driver's side so that the driver doesn't have to get out of the car or reach across. I think it's problematic the way that's currently situated, so I do agree that having these boxes is a good idea, but I am curious about the logistics of this. I mean, I assume they'll have to collect these ballots on election night after 7 o'clock. If someone's in line at 7 o'clock, they'll still get to put their ballot in there if it's a little bit after 7 o'clock, I would assume. Is that going to be monitored? And then in terms of the logistics, in terms of getting results from all these, obviously they've got to collect them, they've got to get them back to the election office. And I believe that the mail ballots that come in last minute will not be processed on election night. So if I'm wrong about that, someone please let us know that. But I believe that if there's a huge amount of these ballots in these boxes throughout the county, we need to understand that there may be some significant ballots that will probably could have impact on the results of the election night results.
I think it might be prudent to have election staff come over and brief the commission, answer those types of logistical questions. We'll get that scheduled.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments.
That's all I had.
Okay. Is that the end of our,
That's all we
Tasks.
have unless the commissioners have something for us.
okay. Commissioners have anything else they'd like to address? I don't see any, so we will be adjourned, and commission meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m.